as president at the WLB, but we know she will continue to come back. But we just want to say, you know, thank you for the 6 years of service, and we really appreciate you. The Honorable Rosie Rios is the 43rd Treasurer of the United States. She served from 2009 to 2016. In her role as Treasurer of the United States, Treasurer Rios was the Chief Executive Officer of the Bureau of Engraving and Printing and the United States Mint, including Fort Knox. She is currently a visiting scholar at the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study at Harvard University. In your package, there's a bio for the Honorable Rosie Rios. Therefore, I'm not going to spend too much time reading her background to you. I would rather like to highlight some of her greatest achievements and share a bit about her incredible passion for empowering women and girls. Since I spent the entire last few weeks listening and reading everything I could find with her name on it, I am empowered, and I will start with the theme that resonated in every speech and from every page. She is hopeful, and her passion is a result of a strong and supportive single mother and a mother's love for her own daughter, Brooke. Rosie learned from her mother to never forget that you earned that seat at the table. And she believes that you earned that seat at the table. She is a self-proclaimed accidental feminist, an accidental historian, and an accidental educator. What was not an accident is her determination to highlight contributions of women throughout the history of our country and the federal government. As a result, the Gallery of Women and Treasury's West Wing includes 23 photographs of influential women in the federal government. What was not an accident is the expansion of her role as treasurer to include focus on economic recovery, women in finance, and her plan to put a woman on the U.S. currency. As a result, she was a driving force behind New York Life, investing $500,000 contribution to the first ever female statue in Central Park. As a result, in 2020, the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment granting women the right to vote, Harriet Tubman will be on our $20 bill. You know, I say as a woman, this is truly inspiring, but I think it's inspiring for anyone. And I also want to remind everyone in this room, especially the women, that this does not happen without many years of hard work, lots of human interaction all over the country, and tough lessons learned. I want to briefly touch on a story that led to the first project of her Empowerment 2020 Foundation, Teachers Writing History. That's RIGHTING. And an education project that she started that highlights historic American women in classrooms across the country. It started with her inspiring and enlightening her social studies teacher, who she hadn't seen in over 30 years. 35 years of teaching, one moment of inspiration. Led to a classroom wall that had been completely devoid of women posters, to a wall filled of women posters acknowledging American women throughout history. She says, "We value what we see, but do we see what we value?" Finally, to quote her one last time, and I put this in, and I know it was gonna add time, but it's my absolute favorite of all the stuff, all the talks and all the reading, and it's the Rosie Pie of Life. There is no such thing as work-life balance. She thinks we should just take that off the table right now. Then, so what's so great about this Rosie Pie of Life? Can women have it all? Well, according to her, it depends on how you define all. Rosie believes, and I think we can all agree, all should be what you choose at that moment in time as your priority. Please help me in giving a very warm welcome to our keynote speaker, the Honorable Rosie Rios.
Who's on the commission, who invited me to speak here. Here I've been on the speaking circuit now for over a year and a half. I've been an accidental feminist now for almost 10 years. Yet I've been living in Montgomery County this entire time, and I think this might actually be my first official Montgomery County speaking engagement. So when we moved from California to Washington, D.C., and I was thinking about where we should move to. My daughter, at the time that I was nominated, my daughter was 8, my son was 12. It was a big decision to make. They only knew one school, one neighborhood, one set of friends. But my best friend from college, my best friend for 35 years, lived on the corner of Maiden Lane and Whittier, right across from Whitman High School. And she said, "This is where you need to live." So sure enough, we packed up, and that is where we live today. We live in Bethesda, Maryland. Very, very happy. But being part of the Whitman community has been an amazing experience. I have no regrets whatsoever. But this presentation is going to be a little different than something I've ever done. Again, I've been on the speaking circuit very, very actively for a year and a half, but I'm going to bring it all home. And so it's going to be a little jarring. There's something really amazing to be out of office and not hold anything back. But I am going to bring it home. And this is actually the first time that my daughter Brooke is going to hear me speak in this capacity. My husband is here, my friends and neighbors are here. Thank you all for coming. But this is your wake-up call. So I speak about a lot of different things. I think I have exactly 15 different speaking topics, whether it's the economy, whether it's about the crisis, etc. But this is about us. Not we versus they. This is about us. So something happened in this last fall that really, again, I've had many wake-up calls. You'll hear about my awakening of being an accidental feminist. You hear about what was already mentioned about we value what we see every day, but do we see what we value? You hear about all of it. But something happened to us, to the Whitman community this last fall that really struck me and has affected all of us in Montgomery County and beyond. It made national news. 3 members of the Whitman community died, very young, 3 students. Between my son, Joey, who's now a 21-year-old junior at Harvard, my daughter, Brooke, who's a senior at Whitman, it affected all of us. And it was a tough month. November, December were tough months. And all of them had some type of relationship with drugs or alcohol. All of them affluent families. It is us. This is us. This is your wake-up call. So getting through that was tough. We're still going through college applications. My daughter Brooke, who I can count the time she's ever cried her entire life, outside of infancy, I never saw her cry more than that month. It all happened within a month's time frame. And so I think the women community is better. There have been a lot of great things. People in this room did some really great activities together. We're all still recovering together. But I decided, as I was preparing for this presentation, that I would do something very, very different. Because in that same amount of time, in that month period between November and December, the Me Too movement kicked off. And I remember my daughter came to me during that time and she said, you know, this whole Matt Lauer thing is really tough. And I said, what do you mean? She says, now he's just one of them. What messages are we sending to our young girls? How are they seeing their future? How are they seeing their future? How do they get to see themselves? So, about a week or so ago, just for fun, I went on Google News and I typed in 4 words. I typed in girls, teens, students, and millennials. And look what I came up with. I don't know if you could read this. These are all real articles. Self-inflicted injuries surge among tween and early teen girls. New study reveals chemical brain imbalance in smartphone addicts. The way we talk about sexting is failing our teenage girls. 6 teenage suicides in 6 months in one Ohio school district. Millennials strive for perfection more than any generation at a cost. Young women using ADHD medicine up 700% over 8 years. And finally, the day that I did this, Kentucky school shooting, 2 students killed. That's what we get to wake up to every day. And this is just a sample, by the way. This is just a sample. So, this is what our daughters get to see. How are we empowering them to be future leaders? If this is the future we're showing them. So, I'm going to take you on my journey. I am going to open up your eyes, hopefully, and take you on my journey starting 10 years ago when I was on the Treasury Federal Reserve Transition Team in the fall of 2008. So, I am an accidental feminist. If you would have known me 10 years ago, I've been with my husband now for 35 years. It's been a crazy ride. But if you would have known me 10 years ago, not that I didn't think these issues were important, it's just that my background's in finance and I've always been kind of focused on numbers. And so as long as you made your hurdles, again, kind of that's how my world worked. I really didn't have to think about everything else around me too much. But something happened, and this picture is one of my favorites. It's actually a photo from 1913. It's called a Suffrage Pageant. And it was 7 years before the passage of the 19th Amendment granting women the right to vote. It's at 15th and Pennsylvania Avenue on the front steps of Treasury. So, what I love about this photo more than anything is those 6 windows from the corner are my office. Was my office. So I got to walk up those steps every single day as a reminder of those who came before me. Now, this is one of those 23 photos that now hang in Treasury in the West Wing. I could only find 23. But this is one of my favorites. You'll find it on my phone. I carry it with me everywhere I go. It still inspires me today. So it was during this time of the Treasury Federal Reserve Transition Team that I came across a lot of these historic photos. And keep in mind, Treasury didn't just make money. And by the way, it is my name on the lower left-hand side of your money. 1.5 trillion. But they didn't just produce currency. They produced all the financial products of the federal government. Everything from military payment certificates to food stamps to postage stamps. They still produce a security page of your passport. And I came across a historic resource center where I came across all the concepts and renderings and drawings of all these financial products, all the symbols and icons that were used on all these products for hundreds of years. And that was my awakening. December of 2008, this is my almost 10-year anniversary of my awakening. Because what I noticed very, very quickly, is that on every single image that I came across of women, they weren't real women. They were like Lady Liberties, sometimes clothed, sometimes not clothed. but they weren't real. They weren't real people. But every single image that I came across of a man was a real man. He was a cabinet member, a president, a founding father. And I thought to myself, if this is the way that we represent the history of our country, why are we missing half the population? And then I started doing my homework. I actually approached this the same way I would approach an investment, right? Existing conditions, case study, precedent, analysis, recommendation, implementation. So case study. At this time, there were over 30 women represented in modern day currency around the world. Over 25 countries. What's wrong with us? Are we that advanced that we are forgetting about our own history? It really shocked me, and then I knew I was onto something. I knew I was onto something. So when, of the 23 people who were on this Treasury Federal Reserve transition team, I was one of 7 who was recommended for a permanent appointment. And I chose the position of Treasurer of the United States to work on this project covertly, small group of people, because I didn't want this to get political. I didn't want to get out into the media. And I knew by law that it's the Secretary of the Treasury, my boss, Tim Geithner, by law, was the final decision on currency design, not the president, not Congress. All I needed was one person. So I did it. Well, I took the job. I was nominated by the president in May of 2009, confirmed by the Senate in July of 2009, and the day after Brookie's birthday, on August 9th, we moved to Maryland. It's been an amazing experience. But as part of that process, Secretary Geithner actually approved this project in October of 2012. And then, as you know, we made the announcement in April of 2016. Part of that process included a very ambitious and robust public engagement process. I met with thousands of people from across the country. I mean, thousands. To solicit their feedback on who should be considered for a currency. By the way, the only legal criteria to be on currency, in addition to being American, is you have to be dead by law. So I learned 3 things on that journey of soliciting this feedback from the American public. One, there's an awful lot of hate out there. It's true. People who didn't know me, who had very strong opinions. 2, I realized very quickly how little people knew about American history and how much less they knew about women in history. So I didn't want this to be about one woman or 10 women. I wanted to be about the hundreds of women who've been overlooked in our history, women who are lovingly referred to as buried treasure. So why is this important? Because people need to see their future. Young girls need to see their future. This is actually a cover of a Time Magazine article from May of 2010. It followed my Women in Finance Symposium, our first ever in Treasury, that I hosted in March of 2010. I went to Secretary Geithner, my boss, and I said, Tim, you realize, by the way, that I'm still the only woman confirmed in Treasury. I was the first woman confirmed in Treasury in the administration. I was the only woman in all of 2009 during one of the most consequential times of our economic history, and I was it. So I went to Tim that January 2010, and I said, Tim, do you realize that 4 of the 6 economic decision makers in the administration are women? He said, what do you mean? I said, well, there's Christina Romer at the Council of Economic Advisors, Sheila Bair at the FDIC, Mary Shapiro at the SEC, Elizabeth Warren at that time head of the Congressional Oversight Panel in the CFPB, now Senator. I said, the only 2 you're missing are you and Larry Summers. I said, I want to have an event that celebrates the 30th anniversary of the National Women's History Project, Women's History Month, but also show who the economic decision makers are in one of the most consequential times of our economic history. And he said, yes, right away. Right away, he said yes. So this was panel 1. This was panel 1. They all said yes. And this led to the cover of this magazine. And the first paragraph talks about the role that they were playing in the economic recovery. Oh, and by the way, they just happen to be women. So, it's important because, yes, we need inspirations in order to have aspirations, right? You need to see your future. You need to know what your options are. It's not just about hope. It's about how to get there. How do you get there? It's not the what, it's the how. And let's show them how to get there. So when we made the announcement in April of 2016, I actually had aggregated a database of almost 230 historic American women. Because again, it wasn't just about the 1 or the 10, but the hundreds, from the feedback that I heard from the public. And so I made sure that that database was posted on Treasury's website so that people knew, again, this was the first time ever in the history of any government that we actually conducted this public engagement process and included a social media portal that aggregated all the feedback from Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, etc. All the emails, all the letters that I received. This is actually a series of letters that I got from this one school in New York, very cheap. But look how important it is. They saw themselves as future history makers. Isn't that great? I didn't ask for this. They sent it on their own. So beautiful. So it was important for me that that database be publicly available. And you heard a little bit about the story about my high school history teacher, true story, Mr. Wilder, who's still teaching, by the way, at Rural High School in Hayward, California. He had seen my CNN video, and he reached out to me in August of 2015. And he said that he wanted to congratulate me, but he also wanted to thank me. This is August 17, 2015. It was the first day of the school year. And at that time, he had been teaching maybe 34 years. I took his class 36 years ago. But at that time, he's been teaching about 34 years. He said he walked into the classroom that day, the very first day of teaching American history for 34 years, and realized that he didn't have any images of women on his classroom walls. And he wanted to change it. And he did. He invited me back that fall. I walked into the classroom. There was Harriet Tubman, Susan B. Anthony, and me. But it dawned on me, my God, if one teacher or 100 teachers or 1,000 teachers did the same thing, can you imagine what it does for our girls and our boys? And our boys. It's the story of our country. It's not his story or her story. It's our story. It's our story. So, when I left the administration in 2016, in fact, I intentionally left that fall, so that on August 26th, 2016, August 26th is Equality Day, I wanted to launch Teachers Writing History. So Teachers Writing History is that database. It's the database of the almost 230 historic American women integrated into the classroom. And my high school was the pilot. It was amazing. So it was crazy during that first month that I got this email from the New Haven Unified School District saying that they heard about Teachers Writing History. Can I come out to the school board meeting and make a presentation? So I did. I flew out, it passed, and it just kind of took off from there. Crazy, crazy. But what was interesting about Teachers Writing History, it's resonated with as many boys as it is as girls. Why? Because if you think about it, if we think it's hard enough to be a woman today, can you imagine what it was like 50 years ago? Or 100 years ago? Or 150 years ago? If you're going to make a dent in history, it's going to be against all odds. You're going to have to dress as a woman to serve in a war. You're going to have to do everything, in the background. Crazy stories of courage and perseverance. And I remember receiving this one email from a member of the King's School in Connecticut, for this young gentleman who was a junior, who had written his headmaster at the King's School to say, I want to start a history club based on Teachers Writing History called Students Writing History. He says, I don't think this is a feminist issue. I just think these are great stories. Exactly. Exactly. These are just amazing, great stories. So I've been on this journey ever since. My background's in real estate finance, but I felt like I had to kind of see this through. I wanted to see this through and see what happens. Because there is something really crazy about this concept of unconscious bias, right? So you all know what unconscious bias is. Unconscious bias is when you don't realize that you're being influenced by something you're exposed to. My theory is this. Could it be that you might be influenced by something you're not exposed to? And the answer is, of course. Of course, right? The whole thing you've heard, if you can see it, you can be it. My gosh, if you can't see yourself in the classroom, if you're not being taught in the classroom of those who came before you, if you can't see yourself on currency, and here's the sad thing about that story about currency, too many of them, by the way, and it's also the thread of my high school history teacher. So when I approached the Bureau of Engraving and Printing director, who reported to me, and his deputy, between the three of them, they had almost 100 years at the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. And I asked them separately the same question. They had the exact same answer. Why haven't we had this discussion before about a woman on our Federal Reserve notes, ever, in the history of our country? You know what the answer was, individually? Same answer. No one's ever brought it up. Just like my high school history teacher, the salt of the earth, the salt of the earth. Just never dawned on him. Just never dawned on him to be walking in that classroom for 34 years and not have an image of a woman on his wall. So there is something to be said about what it means to not be exposed to something, right? So it's not just about currency, it's not just about education, it's not just about leadership positions. These are all triggers of a consciousness that does not exist in this country. It does not exist. Women are invisible. Completely invisible. By the way, of the developed nations today, it's pretty much just us and Saudi Arabia who don't have women on the moderator. It's so sad. It's so sad, but it's hopeful. There's so much hope. Believe me, there is so much. It's not just about hope, it's action. It is action, and I will get into that a little bit more. So, I always like to do my projects that have to be research-based, right? Research is so important. So I don't know if anyone read this almost exactly a year ago. From Science Magazine, Gender Stereotypes and Intellectual Ability. And if you haven't read it, please read it. Another one of my awakenings. And here's what it said. It said, gender notions of brilliance are acquired early and have an immediate effect on children's interests. So here's the takeaway from that article. Ready? 6-year-old girls are less likely than boys to think they're really, really smart. 6-year-old girls are less likely to pursue activities where you have to be really, really smart. And that the biggest changes of that questioning happens between the ages of 5 and 7. Why? School. Exactly. So no matter how much we can protect our kids at home, once they get out into the real world and see what they're exposed to, whether it's a teacher who doesn't call on them, whether it's the mean girls, whether it's the boys, whether it's what they don't see on their walls, they are impacted. They are impacted no matter how much we want to hold them all day long. They are impacted. So for me, I've been on this journey. And once I left office, I hate to say it, it's been much easier for me to get stuff done now that I'm out of office than I was in office. I can explain it. It's unfortunate. So, writing history. Writing history, R-I-G-H-T, is the physical recognition of historic American women. First and foremost, because boy, do we have a lot of work to do. Whether it is statues, congressional gold medals, Women's History Museum. I can talk about this forever, but let me just, statues, true story. So, you heard a little bit already about Central Park. What I did is I took the top 10 cities. By the way, I did this research in one weekend. I took the top 10 cities by population across the country. Top 10 cities. I added in D.C. and I added in San Francisco, my hometown. Of those cities, there are less than half a dozen statues of real women outdoors in the public domain, either in their parks or downtown. That's it. San Francisco, my hometown. Probably the most progressive and inclusive city in the world. Can anyone tell me how many statues they have of real women outdoors in the public domain? Anyone? 0. 0. Central Park, one of the most visited nations in the world, 40 million visitors a year. They have 23 statues. 23 statues of real people. Who can name the women? Anyone? Raise your hand so I can call on you so it's not a... Anyone? Ready? Ready? Mother Goose and Alice in Wonderland. So, about a year and a half ago, in fact, it was at Deb Lang's event, thank you for coming, Deb, a woman came up to me and she said, my God, never heard that before. She says, I'm an agent from New York Life. You need to come meet with our company. You need to come meet with our CEO. You need to come meet with our foundation. They need to hear this. Fast forward to this last February, where I was the closing speaker for New York Life's announcement. Ted Mathis, by the way. Ted Mathis, the CEO, the leadership on this. Their announcement of a $500,000 investment in the first ever female statue in Central Park to be unveiled on August 26, 2020. That is the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment granting women the right to vote. Susan B. Anthony and we look at Katie Stanton on the year ago. It's happening. It's happening. San Francisco, a year ago. San Francisco, a year ago, I spoke at an Ignite event in San Francisco. Some legislative aides from Supervisor Mark Carl's office heard me speak. Oh my gosh, how could this be? Went back to Supervisor Mark Carl and said, what are we going to do? Fast forward to this last October, where I went to hopefully the final fundraiser for a new statue of Maya Angelou in front of the public library. D.C., Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, where people come from all over the world to see what we value and whom we value. Who can name the only 2 female statues in DC outdoors in the public domain? Name people. Not generic. Not generic. Wait, say it again. Oh, wait, raise your hands, I call you. Eleanor Roosevelt at her husband's memorial. Thank you very much. Yes, one of the near ones. One more. Mary McLeod Bethune. Thank you. Mary McLeod Bethune in Lincoln Park in the Southeast. Took me a while, by the way, to find her. It took me a while. You should visit that. Not very many people do. Thank you. So that's it. That's it in our nation's capital. Fast forward to this last fall, where I was one of the key testimonies for DC's proposal for 8 new statues of women minorities in DC. Hopefully it'll happen. But there's so much more to do. Again, it's not just about trinkets and objects and representations. This is what might trigger it for someone else might be a trigger for another issue. It doesn't matter. There's no right or wrong approach. But hopefully, again, this consciousness that does not exist in this country needs to change. Needs to change. It can't just be reactive. You know, I'll never forget going to the march. I was at the march. Rookie was at the march. I was at the march. And the one takeaway, among the many souvenirs that I saw, the one takeaway that I remember the most was the sign that this woman was carrying that said, "Why am I still marching 40 years later?" And it's not to say that nothing's happened in 40 years, but I was asleep. I'll admit it, I was asleep. I was asleep. I think a lot of us were asleep. Men, women, Republicans, Democrats, and everything in between. I think we've all been asleep, quite frankly, and we're still asleep. I can give you too many examples. It's actually very sad. I'm Debbie Downer every time, but again, it's very, very hopeful because I think there's a lot more we can do. So I decided to launch Empowerment 2020. I can go back to my world of real estate finance. I still do some consulting because I've got to pay the bills, but I'm still working. But Empowerment 2020 was important to me because it's very specific and very deliberate. So it's 3 pillars: writing history, the physical recognition of historic American women, women, money, and power. So instead of sex, money, and power, because women have been relegated to that sex pillar for way too long, it's women in positions of money and power. And specifically corporate boards, the C-suite, and elected office, because structural decision-making must change. I am done with words. I am done with words. And it's a collective voice for all the great organizations, by the way, who are probably here, who are doing amazing work on all of this. But the question is, what are we doing by 2020? 2020, August 26, 2020, again, the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment granting women the right to vote. That is my line in the sand. And we're working backwards from that, because once that comes and goes, there is no other milestone. There is no other deadline for women. That's it. So this is a wake-up call. All the fabulous things that I heard this morning when I was walking around at the reception, but it was a working meeting about the priorities in Montgomery County, what they want to do. I heard a lot of fabulous ideas and action-oriented ideas. Wonderful. So what are we doing by 2020? So again, that's going to be my homework assignment to all of you, just to give that some thought. So here's what I'm doing. And Count Up to 2020, by the way, are a series of progressive convenings that measure the outcomes and deliverables for those first 2 pillars. So I launched Count Up 2020, the 100 stakeholders for Empowerment 2020 at Harvard in 2016. This last August 26th, I did the 1,000 stakeholders in San Francisco with Mayor Ed Lee. May he rest in peace. It was the last big conference that he did before he passed away. And it was amazing. And so I can't really make this announcement yet, but my goal is to have my next Count Up 2020 conference here in Maryland. I'm waiting for the paperwork as we speak, but hopefully it will happen for this August 26th. I think there's so much more we can do. And I am here in Maryland, and I want to get something done. I think we have a lot of work ahead of us, and so I want to do this local. Plus, Rookie's in her senior year in high school, and I would like to spend a lot of time away from her. So what am I doing? It's just a very small sample of some of the work that's underway. So why am I showing you a picture of this? So there's a backstory to this. So when I threw out the first, I'm a big baseball fan, when I threw out the first pitch for an Oakland A's game against the Giants in front of 42,000 of my closest friends, what I didn't realize is that when you sign the release form, when you sign a release form, you basically sign your life away. So I get a call from my attorney a few months later saying, hey, do you realize that you're on a baseball card? I had no idea what I was talking about. Sure enough, Topps made 500,000 baseball cards of me. Kind of crazy. They're sold out. You can't even get them on eBay. I think it's weird. It's creepy. It's creepy. But Topps called me a year ago. They called me a year ago and they said, can you come into our offices in New York? They were by Michael Eisner, by the way. They wanted me to come in. Can you come in and sign some of your baseball cards? Because we want to do this national treasurer hunt at one of our conventions. It would be great to have your baseball cards for people to find. So I thought about it. And again, I've been hiding under a rock for a long time. I'm not really, I shun the media for many reasons. But I thought, gosh, I gave it some thought and I said, you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to go in there and I will say to them, look, I'll sign whatever you want me to sign if you do something for me. So, what I'm going to show you, and it's not really public yet, but it will be soon, but I will share it with you, is Topps agreed to do my historic trading cards. So this is a preview card of the first one. This is going to be empty. We'll have many more coming out. But again, this isn't for girls. This is for girls and boys. This is for adults. This is for anyone who wants to learn about the history of our country. And so what I am doing, actually I haven't done this before, I know we have an emerging leaders program. I actually brought enough cards for each one of the girls to have one of these. Hold on to them, they are collector's editions, please don't. But I am excited about this because again, I think kids, that is one thing I learned very quickly is how little kids are taught in the classroom about women. The hardest thing to learn was that the federal government, by the way, does not mandate curriculum. That actually happens at the state level. At the states, they get to determine what our kids learn in the classroom. The federal government only provides guidance. So any way that I can get around that, I'm going to get around that. So this is one of many, many tools, but I think this was kind of a fun one. But I want to share you a couple of other stories that have been kind of motivation for me to try to find my champions and redirect energy. And I think my greatest inspiration have come from two different groups. My mom, who raised all 9 of us as a single parent and all 9 of us off to college. She just turned 80, by the way. She's out of all of us. I know, it's wonderful. And then, but also my kids. I mentioned my daughter and my son, Joey. That's Joey on the left, Ricky on the right. Joey's 21, against junior at Harvard, Brooks is a senior at Whitman. And I feel like everything I learned from them. And Ricky hasn't seen this presentation, by the way, so she's probably, your jaw's dropping any second now. But what I'm about to show you, the next few slides, I actually gave this exact same presentation to Mattel. So about less than a year ago, Mattel, the CEO of Mattel, Margaret J. Jardis, invited me to come speak to their leadership team in their headquarters in El Segundo, California, to talk about teachers writing history and what I've learned about millennials and post-millennials. Well, I can't think of any better experience than what I learn from my kids every single day. And so you'll notice my kids are mixed race. They're half Asian, half Mexican. And what I love about what I've learned about millennials and post-millennials is that if you look at a typical demographic profile, they're less likely to think about gender, less likely to think about race, less likely to think about orientation, because they've had access to the internet, right? And so the world is very flat to them. They don't think about the same borders, boxes, and boundaries that my generation thinks about all the time. So I love learning about the world through their eyes. And one of my favorite examples of that was Joey's Harvard essay. It was called The Tale of Two Yamas. And he starts out his essay by saying, I am Joey. I am Joey. Then he goes on to talk about his 2 grandmothers, one from Hokkaido, Japan, and one from Guadalajara, Jalisco, Mexico. He never once talked about their differences. He talked about how they raised them with common values of family and food and faith. And he ended with, I am Joey. He's not one or the other, he's all of it. He's all of it. Now, Miss Brookie, who was here, she's 4 years younger than Joey, and she wanted to be like Joey. She played his sports, she wore his clothes. She was a very confident person, and I never thought twice about it. Other than that's Brookie. That is Brookie, and I'm not going to change her. Before we moved from Castro Valley, California, she was the only girl in the boys' little league. Fabulous baseball player. Now, when we moved here, because of her age and the level she was playing at, we could not find a team that would accept her. So, she gave up baseball and went to her other passion, which is basketball. And, but before she completely gave up baseball, I love making gifts at the holidays versus buying them. And one holiday, I actually made this for her. I took a comic strip of Monet Davis. I don't know if you can see, it's a bad image, but I superimposed Rookie's head on Monet Davis, and it says here, "You throw like a girl," and the boy says, "Thank you." So I had it professionally trained for her too. But, so by the way, exactly what I'm telling you is what I'm telling Mattel, by the way. I'm still in the Mattel mode. I'm telling all this to Mattel. 80 global executives from all over the world who are listening to exactly what I'm telling you right now about these slides. So I took the opportunity with Mattel to tell them how they influenced me and my daughter. So Mattel, you might know, is Hot Wheels and Barbies and everything in between. Now, when I was thinking about maybe 4 years ago, what am I going to make for Rookie this year? What am I going to make for her? I was looking on the internet, and I came across something really interesting. Mattel, a few years ago, went on a limb and did something they hadn't done before. Very unusual, out of the box, but they wanted to test the waters to see how it would resonate. And so they made this. They made Asian Barbie. Very different. It was a prototype, kind of limited edition. But I thought, my God, it looks exactly like Rookie. It looks exactly like her. That is so interesting. So I thought, now if I would have given Asian Barbie to Rookie, she would have opened it up and thrown it against the wall. She didn't do dolls. She liked Legos and Bionicles and things you could play with and sports. And so I thought, man, how can I do this? How can I, what can I do? So Rookie, by the way, today is co-captain of the varsity basketball team at Whitman High School. So I thought I'd do something different. And I took a risk, the way Mattel took a risk. As I'm telling you the story, by the way, I'm telling this exact same story. I decided to buy Asian Barbie, and I did this. I custom-made her Whitman basketball. So I have the video of Rookie opening up this gift. And she opens it up, she says, "Oh my God, is this me?" She saw herself for the first time, the way no one else has ever seen her. As I'm telling the Mattel executives, you took a risk, you did something out of the box, and you made my daughter see herself for the very first time. Now, at that point in my presentation, it's not a dry eye in the house with Mattel, right? Because when you do something that is so influential in terms of inspiring this next generation, it means something. It's not just a product, it's a tool. It's inspiration. You can see yourself for the very first time. So I can't really announce it, but stay tuned. Stay tuned. So much more happening. So one of them is I'm launching Teachers Writing History International, which is the same premise about what we did with my research on currency design. I'm taking every single piece of currency internationally that's ever been produced that has women on it. By the way, every continent is represented. Even Antarctica has women on their currency, by the way. So what I'm doing is I'm going to show the history of the world as told through the eyes of these women. Never been done before, really exciting. Later this year, stay tuned, much more to come, much more. And so for me, this is one that's been very, very important to me, this next one. I actually got a call from Congresswoman Barbara Lee's office 2 weeks ago about this piece of legislation that I proposed many years ago that went nowhere. So I went to Congresswoman Barbara Lee, who was my member of Congress in the Bay Area, and I pitched this concept of a 50-state quarter program where every state, district, and territory can have a historic American woman represented on their quarter. So right now, if you look at the quarters in your pocket, there's a 50-state quarter program in place for the National Park Service that passed in 2011 and will sunset in 2021. So Maryland's quarter is Fort McHenry. California's quarter is Yosemite. My proposal is that every state, district, and territory gets to pick a historic American woman on their quarter starting in 2021 over a 10-year period. So why is that important? And by the way, the reason Congresswoman Barbara Lee called me, or her office called me, is to let me know they have a Republican sponsor as well. So we'll be formally introduced, very exciting. We're working on this forever. So why is it important? This isn't just about women for the sake of women on currency or coins. It's because the process that we did in terms of seeking public feedback, creating a database of historic American women, and now that becomes a vetted tool for every state. Make a difference. So now that this is happening, finally, hopefully we'll make a dent into what your kids are going to learn in the classroom, male and female. But I feel like there's so much more to do. One of these other initiatives that I am launching now that came from my August 26th counter conference in San Francisco is what I call the Confident Girl Project. I don't know if you can see this or not, but basically there are 3 confidence deficits that I focus on. One is when a girl first starts school. Another is when a girl first takes algebra, which is usually a determinant of whether or not she's going to continue on in the math and sciences. And the third one is when a girl first starts college, which for men and women, when they first start college, it's obviously the first time they're making a lot of decisions for themselves, what classes to take, whether they're going to vote, what they're going to eat, etc. But for a young woman, it's also the physical vulnerability that she's never had to confront before. So those are the 3 areas that I focus on. The Confident Girl Project is a collaborative effort between school districts, organizations that support girls, and the private sector to fund this, to make sure that we can have custom-made programs integrated into in the country, representing over 120 girls' organizations. They're fabulous. I want to model them everywhere. Everything from counseling to how to code to tutoring. It's amazing. So the goal is to match those organizations, custom-made programs within the schools. So I had 6 school superintendents and 4 university presidents at my conference who are coming on board with this as a pilot. Really, really exciting. So much more to do. So much more to do. So you can probably get this hint of what I do. All I'm doing is I'm redirecting energy. I'm redirecting energy. I'm a one-person show, by the way. I'm a one-person show with an army of angels. Because once you wake people up, you realize just how easy it is to change it. How to fix it. Right? I'm not telling Mattel how to do their business. They've been doing it forever. But we're redirecting energy. I was just at Google's Creative Lab offices in New York on Friday. And we've done already some great work together with Expedition Tours. So Google Expedition is the ability to create virtual reality content for specific subjects. So of the over 500 Expedition Tours that Google had, they didn't have one of a historic American woman. Fast forward to the last year, we now have over 40. Very exciting. But it's going to be huge. Huge with Google. It's going to be amazing. So, much more to come. So why am I doing this? This isn't about me. It is about honoring my mom, recognizing those who came before me, connecting those who could actually make a difference, redirecting that energy, and inspiring the next generation of leadership. So, I'm done with words. An outcome. And my goal is a year from now, I'm going to do that same Google search, by the way, Google News, on girls, teens, students, and millennials, and I'm going to see what pops up. And I'm going to see if it's different than what I found before. There is no knight in shining armor. DC is not going to save you. It is about you, each and every one of you who are empowered to make a difference. One person can make a difference. One person. And it's each and every one of you. Don't keep pointing to everyone else or who you're going to vote for and they're going to do it. It's got to be you. It's got to be you. It's like my favorite. Anyone who knows? Find your ruby slippers, put them on, and use them. It's all, each and every one of us. And finally, one more exciting thing that literally just happened. So I got a call from Senator Chuck Schumer's office. I've just been appointed, I'm the final member of this congressional commission to celebrate the semi-sesquicentennial anniversary of our nation's founding, the 250th, which is happening in 2026. Stay out of it. I got this. I got this. My point to you is it's time. It's more than time. It is more than, it's been time. And so when my daughter goes to march again, it's going to be a celebration of what we've done. What we've done, what we're setting out to do in the future. To all of you, I leave you with this one question. What are you doing by August 26, 2020? Thank you.